Hello, a warm welcome from me, astrologer Patrick Arundell, to my in-depth, deep dive Mercury retrograde video. I've had 29 million views on YouTube now, and if you're new to my channel, I'd be honoured if you'd subscribe. If you're a returning viewer, thank you so much for joining me again. Mercury retrograde begins on the 29th of December and goes on through to the 18th of January. It doesn't emerge from its post-retrograde shadow, however, until the 17th of February. So there's lots to share with you. And also, as the event begins, so Venus is just 14 minutes away from an exact conjunction with Mercury, so that's particularly telling, and both are forging a gorgeous alliance with the dreamy but very imaginative energies of Neptune. So I need to give you some insights on what that will mean too. Now, how I'm going to structure the video is first of all tell you exactly when this event will occur in all the major cities of the world. I'll then share with you on the screen the Zodiac chart wheel that we can all relate to, which sees that collection of energy in Capricorn, including Mercury and Venus, in the 10th house. But then I'll go on to share with you the event chart wheel based on Placidus, which actually sees Mercury and Venus in the 12th house, a much more reflective location, and that does show an ascendant in the sign of Aquarius. Finally, please stay with me. I will then go through each of the 12 zodiac signs from Aries through to Pisces, which you can watch in terms of your sun or ascendant, or if you wish, both. Now, we're nearly upon year 2023. If you've yet to order your personal forecast for the upcoming year, if you give me 3 pieces of personal birth data of time, date and place of birth, I can give you your forecast along with your life roadmap, a separate report which shows the more long-term potentials, but also challenges that you have or will encounter. And finally, in my special package, you can also get your zodiac forecast for the new year, along with your Indian and also Chinese forecast, and those are completely free. So there's 30% off all of that. Please see the link beneath this video. So Mercury retrograde begins on the 29th of December, ends on the 18th of January, but the post-retrograde shadow doesn't finish until the 17th of February. So I think that 6-week period broadly is going to see a lot of us thinking about our goals, our ambitions, our role in life, how we connect with the wider world, how we even connect with our wider community. Anything to do with leadership, whether we want to be a leader or we need to work with someone who wants to lead us, is going to be something that we're thinking a lot about. And part of the reason for this is the world is such a fast changing place. And of course, there are a lot of wider environmental issues, whether it's the cost of living, the shortage of fuel, whether it's jobs that once were very much part of the mainstream that have made way due to the digital revolution, then the impact of COVID. So an awful lot is changing all at the same time. So all of us collectively are going to be having lots of conversations, I feel, about how we're going to tackle this. Now, if you're someone who's always thought that you'd love to be an entrepreneur, this retrograde can be so positive for you because it's linked so well with Venus, the planet of money, but also of relationships. There could be a conversation you have over the next few days or through those first 6 weeks of the new year, which is really inspirational in terms of providing the spark. Perhaps it's a potential customer you get chatting to. Perhaps if you do work in a bigger corporate structure, you're needing to flex and find your ways to use your talents in the most focused ways. So with Venus there, a little bit of charm will certainly not go astray. So it's not just the ideas we have, Mercury, or the way we express them, Mercury, and the dryness and to the point energy that we deliver them with, Capricorn because of Saturn, and Mercury in Capricorn is very businesslike and wants to see tangible results, but Venus is there suggesting that if we can just try to find ways to ease the delivery of those ideas, then that is going to make them that much more receptive to others. Now, Neptune is also forging a sextile to the duo of Mercury and Venus, which are only 14 minutes apart. So that gives us a lot of information as well. It tells us that however much we're grappling with these practical realities, Capricorn, and how we're thinking about them, which is Mercury, and how we're relating to them, Venus, or trying to find the financial solution, Venus, Neptune's saying that our intuition and instincts are very important to the big decisions we make. So even if there is a chance to punch through and do something that does push us out of our comfort zone and see us reach towards a more higher visibility and raise our profile and gain more recognition or target a big goal, we need to also stay in touch with how it feels. So I think that's going to be very important over the next 6 weeks. Now, just to tell you that there is going to be another 3 Mercury retrogrades in Earth signs that will occur this coming year. And that is because from the 21st of April to May the 15th, Mercury is retrograde in Taurus. From the 23rd of August through to September the 15th in Virgo. Then it goes back into Capricorn again, so we get the second Capricorn one from 13th to the 23rd of December, and then finally Mercury inverts in the retrograde back into the sign of Sagittarius, where it's actually detrimented, and that brings the curtain down on the year, and Mercury will go direct on January the 2nd, 2024. So why is this significant? Well, it's because in 2022 the retrogrades were all air retrogrades, and that's very much to do with ideas. Now what we're looking for from this year is tangible evidence of grappling with the reality of our resources, money. So it's almost like the coin cards in tarot in terms of our thinking this year. And of course we have got this big reset that's gone on because of that total lunar eclipse, partially. It was also because of the North Node returning to Taurus for the first time in 17 years in terms of the true node on the 17th of January last year. And that, along with Uranus and Mars coming together in the spring, together in Taurus, has created a lot of uncertainty. And as we come into this new year, we all need to think about how we can eke out a little bit more with the available resources we've got. Be a bit more prudent. That word thrifty has even started to do the rounds. So whether it's turning down our radiators to conserve on our cost of energy bills, or cooking food from scratch, being a bit more choosy about how many times we go out for a meal, these kind of things. It's all very much to do with a theme, not just of thrift, but also of really realising that these resources that we've been using, perhaps sometimes rather unconsciously, are not infinite. You know, we're taking from the earth, and we just need to be more conscious of that. So that's going to be a theme for the whole of this year. Now on the screen now you can see the zodiac chart wheel for this event, and this basically starts at 0 degrees in Aries on the vernal point, and the reason for that is the start of the zodiacal journey. So you can see on this screen that the gathering of energy that we have in Capricorn is in house 10, and there is Mercury and Venus just 14 minutes apart, quite gloriously in that very visible position. However, there are other influences going on as well. You can see the Sun forges a great trine with the North Node in Taurus, where it's going to be through to the 13th of July this coming year, once it moves into Aries. And that's really saying to us that, again, listen to our instincts in terms of the prevailing trends around resources. We also have Pluto in Capricorn in a square with the moon, which is in the last degree of Pisces, conjuncting in a disassociate way with Jupiter just in Aries. Now that's quite a complex aspect, because the moon square Pluto can be quite turbulent. It can bring a lot of traction and a lot of leverage to an emotional issue. Jupiter, on the other hand, squaring Pluto, when people have Jupiter-Pluto stuff going on in the transits in their chart or natally, they can try a bit too hard, want a bit too much power over other people. And because the position of Jupiter, which is about growth in Aries, is a cardinal sign and the beginning of this story, and Capricorn energy is that culminating sign, very much about the progress we're making, but perhaps in a more material way. It's kind of saying to us, don't let our practicality pulverize our passion, but at the same time we need to be very realistic about where we are in each of our lives. Now, in terms of the natal chart wheel based on Placidus, you can see that the ascendant is in Aquarius. And the wonderful thing about this is that it does forge beautiful angles with all the other angles. So whether it's the midheaven in Sagittarius, the descendant in Leo, or the fourth house cusp in Gemini. So that ascendant's quite sweet. But the thing is that the midpoint between the sun and the moon is actually conjunct Saturn in Aquarius, and I think that tells us a lot where we are. So all this Capricornian energy, but with the Mercury retrograde, is telling us that we need to rethink the approach that we've had over many years, which has been very much rooted in materialism and consumerism, consumption. And what the Aquarius energy is saying to us coming through is, look, we need to have an understanding of how this impacts on the collective. And we are seeing, if you like, a transitional period between how it has been, where big business, big corporations have dominated, and now people are wanting much more recognition for their individual contributions, which is absolutely right. So all citizens need to be treated with a great deal of respect. And that's a lot about what the rethinking that's going to be going on collectively over the next 6 weeks is going to represent. But we also have Jupiter forging a lovely angle to all those angles as well. So a sextile to the ascendant, that's very bubbly, and a wonderful trine to the midheaven, and a trine to the descendant, and a sextile to the IC, the fourth house, very much to do with how we feel. So though Jupiter is clashing with Pluto on this event, it is also very bubbly in terms of how we think. And of course Mercury rules the sign of Gemini, and that's an air sign, very much how we think. The precision and practicality of its rulership of Virgo, which is an earth sign, is partly rooted into this story because of the earth energy that's shared between Virgo and Capricorn. But just so you know, Mercury also shines in exaltation in Aquarius. It's in its full in Leo, but it's also detrimented in Sagittarius and Pisces, because although they're mutable signs, and obviously the rulers of the rulership of Mercury in Gemini and Virgo are both mutable as well, it is because they're both opposite and of course square in the case of Mercury's rulership of Virgo to Sagittarius, and Mercury in Gemini squares Pisces. So we've got two squares, two oppositions, and that's why we get those detriments. But in the sign of Capricorn, Mercury, I must stress, gives us an opportunity to be considered, cautious, thoughtful. It's very good for analysing things, and because Venus is there, we can have some really bubbly conversations. The sense of humour that Capricornian people have is shared by Mercury in Capricorn, very dry, but also this is not a sign where Mercury is hosted in a way which is frivolous. It wants to get to the bottom of what's really valuable and think about how that can be turned into something more lasting and tangible. So that gives us a little bit of an idea about the big story around this particular event. Now, please stay with me. I'm going to go through each of the 12 zodiac signs, give you a flavour of what you can expect over the next 6 weeks in terms of your sign, what you can work on, and also what you need to look out for. So, Aries, it is like the collective for you, very much about how you're perceived by a line manager or what your goals and ambitions are for the new year. But I think it's true to say that as you're going into the new year and therefore your solar return has Mercury retrograde within it, it wouldn't be a surprise if by the end of 2023 you do change your job. But this may be something that's been brewing for some while. And the other clue is that Saturn moves into your 12th house on the 7th of March. It's followed by Pluto briefly moving into Aquarius on the 24th of March, and that's going to be a sojourn that doesn't last for a long time, but it's asking you to think very much about your future. Now, I think in terms of employment, if you don't have a job at the moment, it's possible that you may have to take old skills and talents and repurpose them in a new environment, because that's what can happen with Mercury retrograde. Yes, it can cause glitches, but also it can help us to recalibrate, retrain, to review. So think of the ways in which you're wanting to connect to the wider world and ask yourself the question, are you succeeding? If you're not, the chances are you're going to change some part of your approach over the next 6 weeks and potentially over the next year, because once you have the two new moons in your sign in March and April, one of them a solar eclipse, and the North Node joins you on the 13th of July, it is a chance for you to really start afresh. So I think it's very likely that if you're not happy at the moment, a big shift is going to be heading your way. So Taurus, your Mercury retrograde is going to be potentially most impactful around contracts, anything to do with expanding your horizons, technology, teaching, training, and travel. And of course, Mercury retrograde can create glitches, but it also can create opportunities. So this can be an area that you think extremely carefully about. And part of the reason for that is your ruling planet Venus is very close on this Mercury retrograde to Pluto. And by the 1st of January, they will be exactly conjunct. Some kind of fated change awaits you in this new year. It may see you need to become much more conscious of the truth of certain associations or even your own values. But it's also important when Venus and Pluto are in the mix to be aware of any kind of leverage that's being used, because it's possible that someone could tell you about a scheme which sounds very exciting and very tempting, but there could be some kind of catch. So anything to do with ethics is something you do need to be mindful of right through the first 6 weeks of this year, and I think really right through 2023. But if you are looking to learn a new language or go on a course of higher education or retrain, this Mercury retrograde can give you the impetus to actually do it. And it could be a case of who as much as what you know when it comes to the expansion of your situation. So Gemini, your Mercury retrograde is asking you to think very much about resources in terms of the practical physical world. Venus, of course, governs that. The 8th house is about longer term financial planning. But equally, the 8th house is about where we're most invested. So the conversations that could ensue over the next 6 weeks could be around about intimacy or what you might share with others, whether this is a business affiliation or whether it is something more intimate with a partner. Because Pluto is so close to Venus, this is a particularly powerful Mercury retrograde. So if there is a romantic involvement that you have that you don't really feel that there is that sense of connection at a deeper level. I think that's going to be the thing you're thinking a great deal about over the next few weeks. Also because Neptune is in the part of your scope to do with how you connect to the wider world. Influences or points of view from people that you have respect for, people within your family or other older players, or sources of information that you're attracted to, can also in some ways distort, potentially, despite the sextile, some of the more pragmatic energy that Mercury in Capricorn is asking you to grapple with. So a lot to think about, a lot to talk about, but the 8th house, of course, can be quite secretive. Is there somebody that you've got some kind of longing for or a connection for that you're not actually speaking with at the present time? Is Mercury retrograde a kind of paradoxical thing, pushing you to change that? Or do you want to retreat a bit to reflect on what you really want? So Cancer, your Mercury retrograde potentially is all about relationships, but of course the 7th house can be where we compete. Perhaps you will have to have an exchange of ideas early in this new year. Venus is asking you to don the velvet gloves and to insert the steel fist if there is something very important that you need to discuss or present, and you want to do so with a degree of decorum, but at the same time let the other party know that what you say is what you really mean. But also, it could be that someone thinks that you're a little bit subjective in conversations and you're not actually reaching out and even listening as they see it enough to where they're coming from. So Mercury retrograde in the 7th house of relating really does provide some great opportunities. But if there is a relationship which hasn't quite been working, the politics of Pluto on Venus cannot be underestimated. Leo, Mercury retrograde in your 6th house points towards anything like an appointment with the dentist or with a physician, or perhaps the osteopath, maybe even for your pet. Over the next 6 weeks, those things could have a tendency to be rescheduled. But equally, if you are thinking about how you can change the emphasis in year 2023 away from being so snowed under really by obligations and responsibilities, perhaps you're the one thinking about the type of work you want to do or the type of obligations that work for you, pardon the pun, or not. And the bigger reason for that is a big blast of energy is coming in 2023, which is going to encourage you to have much more free time for you, to be much more experimental, much more adventurous. So you've been really conscientious in recent years, but I think if it has become a little bit dull and a little bit oppressive in some ways, maybe you need to discuss with others some details which to them may not seem a big deal, but to you are proven to be quite oppressive. So for example, if you're a main caregiver at home and other people tend to be a bit inconsiderate about washing up, taking shoes off, being quiet at night, cleaning their rooms, all the kind of things you get in a family household, you may want to push back and say, look, we need to have a new sort of set of rules and regulations which have a bit more precision, where other people are taking some of the responsibility, picking the hoover up and putting it around instead of you. So that's the type of stuff that you are going to be thinking and talking about a lot over the next few weeks. So Virgo, of course, Mercury is your ruler, and it asks you to be very precise, be very discriminating in your approach. It asks you to try to find those tangible benefits. You like helping people, but the 5th house is a gloriously self-expressive area, but of course it's ruled by Saturn. So if you are going to express yourself, you probably want to feel really sure of your ground. So with your ruler rewinding, but very close to the beautiful Venus in the 5th house and Pluto, are you starving yourself through your sense of duty, with an opportunity to be the star turn, to really demonstrate to people just how talented you are. That's the big question for you, Virgo, on this event. Libra, for you, Venus being so close to Mercury retrograde in your 4th house means that there could be some changes of plan almost immediately in terms of the New Year celebrations. I'm not sure that you're necessarily going to be particularly fazed by that. This is an energy that you're taking into the new year, so the chances are a move of home or reconfiguring where you live now, or a change of relationships with people in your extended family, if not your blood relatives, are all possible during year 2023. But with such a lot of energy coming into your 7th house of relating, getting things on a much more balanced basis for you is going to be very important to your sense of self. Scorpio, the collective in the 3rd house, which includes your modern ruler Pluto, and of course Mercury, which governs this zone through its rulership of Gemini, suggests that it's important to say what you mean and mean what you say. Venus can bring a sliver of superficiality to communications, particularly in its alliance with Mercury. It can also be enormously vivacious. And if you're someone who does like to chat with people, not every Scorpio is going to be hiding behind a defense structure with, sort of sandbags all around them. That's why I like to push back against these archetypes. So you have an opportunity to rethink some of your ideas, some of your ideals as well. And there could be some changes in relationships immediately around you, siblings, neighbours, that kind of thing. But also a good time to think about how you share information. So whether it's your CV, if you're someone who enjoys writing with a blog, or you work in the digital sector, Mercury retrograde suggests that something may need redoing or reconfiguring, but that doesn't mean to say it's going to be a negative. But if you are travelling anywhere, obviously ticketing, technology are influenced by the 3rd house, so there could be the potential for snags. Which brings us to Sagittarius. Now, the fact that Venus has been in your 2nd solar house has been a good news story, and particularly that Venus combines with Pluto as you go into the new year. So having Mercury retrograde suggests that you may have to wait a little bit longer for some of the rewards that I feel are coming for you in the new year, or micromanage anything you can influence when it comes to controlling the flow of information. So, for example, check your bank statements. There may be something that creeps in that's nothing to do with you, or if there's a renewal on some insurance, are they just banging up the premium because you're too busy to look? Those are the kind of things that if you really dig down into the detail, which I think you can find a bit dull, there may be some ways in which you can squeeze out more from your resources. But the 2nd house is also about your sense of self-worth. And if that is tender, Mercury retrograde here is asking you, how could you rethink your thinking about your self-worth? So that could be something you really grapple with over the next 6 weeks, which brings us to Capricorn. So of course for you, Mercury going retrograde in your own sign suggests that some of the ideas that you'd been building up and developing in the back of your mind in recent weeks, particularly that saw you casting yourself in a more individualistic way, some of those may not actually make it to the finishing line, because it's important to understand the 1st house symbolically is the start of the journey, even though your sign itself is very much the culmination where we start to see very firm evidence of status and success building up. Mercury could mean that you do need to rethink something, and it could be something very personal to you. But that doesn't mean to say that one strand of yours can't still be a winner. With Venus so close to Pluto, the energy you're giving out is going to draw people to you. You just need to make sure it's the right energy and the right message. Which brings us to Aquarius. Mercury going retrograde in the 12th house suggests that you could feel a bit detached from other people. Now, You're lucky because Venus is moving into your sign right at the start of 2023. So that's going to offset some of the isolation that a Mercury retrograde in the 12th house can create. But if you are someone who suffers a little bit with social anxiety, or feeling a bit detached from others, or feeling that there's a little bit of lack of confidence around trust issues, that might be something that you can look at afresh over the next few weeks. And whether you're doing some reading or talking to someone knowledgeable, having some counselling, that kind of stuff can be actually very healing. But also Mercury retrograde in the 12th house can also suggest that something or someone from your past may seem to come back into your mind. Are they going to come back into your life by getting in touch? Whether you'll welcome this or not is another matter. Which brings us to Pisces. And for you, Mercury retrograde in the 11th house is very much about sociability, connections to others, the network, your friendships and your long-term future. All of those could go through some changes, but there's still oodles of opportunity for you to burst into the new year. But with Saturn arriving your sign on the 7th of March, if there's something that you'd worked towards over a very long period of time and got there, and it doesn't seem to be giving you much satisfaction now, maybe you need to think again about a newer vision for your future. But that may mean disengaging. What was the phrase that Gwyneth Paltrow said? It was consciously uncoupling. I think there may be a need to consciously uncouple from some of your old friendships or aspirations which no longer work for you, and then that's going to help you to reset and recast and go again in quite a dynamic way.